Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Every year after the draft ends, we always talk about the undrafted free agents, and we've gone through a couple of them that I like, that I think have a legitimate chance to make the Saints roster. We talked a day ago about the Saints adding receiver Malik Flowers out of Montana's dynamic returner and why that may make a lot of sense. If you missed that, you can catch it on the AFR Saints YouTube channel from yesterday. I want to highlight a few other players because what we've learned now as some of this info is starting to leak out, we know what the Saints had to offer some of these undrafted free agents. And this is going to sound odd, but follow me. Sometimes it is better to go undrafted than to be drafted. And while I know that probably sounds counterintuitive, remember, and everyone wants the sort of honor of being drafted. You want to hear your name called. For a lot of these guys, that's a lifelong dream, but there's only 255 guys that are going to have their name called. So not everybody's going to be drafted, and plenty of guys every year go undrafted and make teams and become really good players. But the thing that's beneficial about going undrafted as opposed to being a late-round pick is, number one, oftentimes you make more money as an undrafted free agent. I'll explain that in a second. And number two, you get to pick where you go so you can pick an advantageous situation. There are times, the example that I give a lot, there was several years ago, the Saints drafted a running back. And it was Daniel Lasco was his name, if you remember that name. Daniel Lasco was a running back out of Cal. I'm trying to remember, I'm looking it up right now to see exactly what year that was. Daniel Lasco was a 7th-round pick in 2016. Here it is. He was a running back out of Cal, and the Saints loved him because of his special teams ability. Now, the Saints were loaded up at running back at that point, and Lasco had no shot of making an impact as a running back on the Saints roster at that point. But the Saints knew if he went undrafted, they had no chance to sign him because he'd sign somewhere where he'd have a better chance to go be a running back. But the Saints loved the player, depth at running back and special teams. So they drafted him. Had he gone undrafted, he would have signed with a team that would have given him more of an opportunity to be a running back. So all that to say, when you, I'll give you an absolute, for instance, financially. So a year ago, after the draft, the most notable undrafted free agent that the Saints signed was Abram Smith. Remember, we talked about him a ton. Coincidentally, another running back from Baylor who had played linebacker, switched to running back, was a 1,000-yard rusher on the team that won the Big 12. Saints were looking for running back help. They didn't draft one, so they went and offered Abram Smith $222K to sign as an undrafted free agent. So keep that number in mind, 222. They also, by the way, signed Rashid Shaheed last year as an undrafted free agent for $222K. The Saints did not have a 7th-rounder last year. Their 6th-round pick was Jordan Jackson, the defensive tackle out of Air Force. Jordan Jackson's guaranteed money from the Saints as a 6th-round pick was $176,692. So the undrafted guys, Abram Smith and Rashid Shaheed, got about $50,000 more than the 6th-round pick. And they got to pick the team they went to that they had a better chance of making the squad. Like Rashid Shaheed, who obviously made the team, and Abram Smith, who didn't, and is, I think, playing in the XFL now. XFL or USFL, he's in one of them right now. But so, again, why sometimes it is more advantageous to go undrafted than to be a late-round pick. So that's why it's always interesting to kind of highlight some of the undrafted free agents. And now the numbers we've gotten, there's 3 that were paid handsomely as undrafted free agents. Mark Evans, the offensive lineman out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, led the way with $241K. They paid Mark Evans more than they paid Abram Smith and Rashid Shaheed a year ago. Anthony Orji, we've talked about him, linebacker from Vanderbilt. They gave him $216. And wide receiver Shaquan Davis out of South Carolina State, they also gave him $216K. So those are three guys that you're going to have to look at when they get into camp as dudes that, when you always ask, okay, what undrafted free agents have the best shot of making the team? So often we look at draft picks because the conventional wisdom is if a team is going to invest a draft asset in a player, they're more likely to give that player ultimate or other more opportunities to make the team. They're going to give that player the benefit of the doubt. If you're coming down to two wide receivers, one was an undrafted guy, one was a 6th-round pick, you're probably going to go with the draft pick because you used a draft asset. Sometimes it's so obvious one way, you go the other. And the best example of that was Antonio Pittman. Back in 2007, when the Saints drafted Antonio Pittman in the 4th round, and they also signed Pierre Thomas as an undrafted free agent, Pierre Thomas just beat him, won the job, and they made the right decision, right? You just whiffed on the 4th-round pick, but you made up for it because the running back that you signed as an undrafted free agent made the team and is, going to the Saints Hall of Fame. So there are instances where because you're a draft pick, you might get the benefit of the doubt, unless if it's a situation like this where these guys were paid even more than some of the draft picks are, and they're going to have a better chance to make the team. So Mark Evans is going to be interesting. This is almost it's a very similar comp to Teron Armstead. 6'2", 303, started 5 years, all at Arkansas Pine Bluff, same place Armstead won. He spent his career at left tackle, so you're talking about a dude that is an athletic edge, 23 years old, and not edge, offensive lineman on the edge, athletic on the edge as an offensive lineman. That's one guy worth keeping an eye on. Obviously, you drafted Trevor Penning last year, and you hope he beats out James Hurst this year and becomes your franchise left tackle, but you can always use depth at the tackle spots because you always have injuries, and yes, that would be fantastic if he could make the team. We talked about Anthony Orji, the linebacker out of Vanderbilt, had a chance to interview him at SEC Media Days. He is an Adonis. I mean, he is 6'1", 230. Dude's got like 4% body fat. It's insane. He wore number 0 at Vanderbilt. He led the SEC last year in tackles per game at nearly 9 tackles per game. He was awesome. So 19.5 tackles for loss over his last 24 games as a starter. Started his career as a safety, bulked up, moved down to linebacker, and an athletic inside player. I'm very, very, very optimistic about him. A team captain type guy. So great in the locker room. Obviously a smart player if you're going to go to Vanderbilt. So that's another guy worth watching, especially, we're going to keep saying it, at linebacker, where Demario Davis is phenomenal, the best free agent signing that the Saints made outside of Drew Brees. But you look at Demario Davis, and who's getting older, and Pete Werner, who's been injured, who's a great player, but you need depth at linebacker. He could be a steal as an undrafted free agent. And then Shaquan Davis, South Carolina State wide receiver, 6'4", 216, a guy who averaged 20 yards a catch. I mean, big play dude at 6'4", 216. We know the Saints' proficiency at finding some of these smaller school guys. It's always kind of curious how much of that was Sean Payton, how much of it was the organization as a whole identifying, that sort of hidden gems at receiver in the late rounds or as undrafted guys. I mean, we all know it's Marcus Colson out of Hofstra. We talked about Rashid Shaheed just a bit ago. I mean, you can even go back to Lance Moore, who had spent a year in the NFL, I think with Cleveland prior to the Saints signing him. But Sean Payton brought him in. He was he was actually with the last year of the Jim Haslett era in 2005. But point is, the Saints have found guys throughout their history, smaller school guys, maybe undrafted free agents who have a skill set they like, and perhaps Shaquan Davis is one of those guys, so we'll keep an eye as they get toward camp, and they like him enough to offer him $216K as an undrafted free agent. So just a couple of undrafted free agents worth keeping an eye on as the Saints have invested. I mean, they have put their money where their mouth is with these three guys, paying each of them over $200,000 to sign as undrafted free agents. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.